Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Meslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Ryan Ruff is a guest I've wanted to have on the podcast for a long time and has become a close friend over the last year or so. He's the host of the Boundless Body Podcast, which I absolutely love and think everyone listening should go check out. Casey has been a certified personal trainer since 2007. He successfully ran a metabolic testing program for a large gym and oversaw 13 programs in the West region for his company. He has multiple certifications as a personal trainer, lifestyle coach, and performance enhancement specialist. With his nutrition coaching certifications, he specializes in low-carb lifestyles, including ketogenic and carnivore diets. He's helped thousands of clients over 13 years learn how to achieve their best lifestyle through movement, lifestyle management, and proper diet. He lives in South Jordan, Utah, with his wife, Bethany, and their 2 dogs and 2 cats. In his free time, he loves to cycle, play hockey, walk, and paddleboard. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Thank you so very much, Scott. It is an absolute honor to be here.
Absolutely. We've spoken a bunch and I've been on your podcast, which, as I said, I'm really enjoying. You have eclectic guests and you ask really great questions. But I don't know as much about your personal health history and what got you into personal training and nutrition. So I'd love to start there.
Yeah, sure. That sounds great. So I guess I was the pretty typical kind of chubby kid growing up. And when I got to middle school, I wanted to do something about it. So I went to Kmart and bought a weight set and some book or a poster of like how to lift weights and whatever. But when I was 16, I started to get into cycling. Lance Armstrong was kind of on the come up. And so it was a little bit more popular. And I went and bought a bike and started riding and really enjoyed it. And it was soon after that I decided to buy a heart rate monitor. In fact, the heart rate monitor that I got was originally a gift from my parents, who gave me a TV VCR combo to take down to college, if that doesn't date me. And I took it to the store and returned it to buy a Polar, I think it was a 210 heart rate monitor. So I was kind of that nerd.
Nice.
And I would track my heart rate, and it was just kind of fun and kind of a way to get a subjective measurement of my training and things like that. By the time I was in college, I joined a really kind of expensive gym. It was a little bit out of my price range, but I needed a place to train in the off season. And I was studying architecture and I was working at the local bike shop, but I started to train at this gym and I watched these personal trainers do their job. And I started to think like, wow, that's pretty cool. I could maybe get into that. And the other thing is that gym was also selling heart rate monitors. And I knew heart rate monitors pretty much up and down because I'd used them for so long. And so my former boss called me bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I marched into his office one day and said, what do I need to be a personal trainer? He told me the industry standard certification to get. And so I went home and ordered it and studied for a few months and passed the test and was hired as a trainer in, I believe it was March of 2007.
Yeah, that's awesome. And super interesting. You made the right trade there, I think, with the TV VCR for the heart rate monitor.
Debatable. I don't know what VCR videos I would have been watching in college, but yeah, I guess it was probably a good thing.
Yeah. And so talk to me about the metabolic testing and measuring metabolism. How did you stumble upon that and get interested in that area?
Yeah, so that was another cool aspect of something that I learned. And so having a heart rate monitor is basically like having an odometer. Like you can tell what speed you're going, how hard you're working, but you don't necessarily know the speed limit or what your body is doing. And so soon after I was hired on, I started to learn about metabolic testing. And this was a program that they had where people could come in they would wear a mask that would collect their respirations, and that would feed into a computer that would analyze the respirations. So your breath is really the key to understanding what is going on inside your body. So the total amount of air that you're breathing in and breathing out is a really good correlation for how many calories you're burning. So you and I are just kind of sitting around, we're having a conversation, not really breathing too heavily, so we're not burning a lot of calories. But if we were to go on a run or do some aggressive exercise, we would start breathing more, and that is a byproduct of burning more calories. So that is one of the things that a metabolic analyzer can look at. It can tell you what the total volume of air that's coming in and out, which tells you then how many calories you're burning. They also can go one step further by measuring the difference between the oxygen and the carbon dioxide that you're breathing in and out and is being exchanged in your body. And that's also very important because that will tell you where those calories are coming from. So it's not just so important about how many calories you're burning, like that can matter, but it's really important to tell, wait a second, what kinds of calories are you burning? You can burn calories from fat, and you can burn calories from carbohydrates, and everything in between. And so by using a metabolic analyzer, you can tell exactly what substrate somebody is using, fat or carbohydrates, and then you can tailor programs to enhance the fat burning. Because most people come in and they say like, hey, I want to lose weight. And they do, but they want to lose fat. They don't necessarily want to lose muscle or just total weight. They want to lose fat. And so by using those things as a tool, we were able to tell people how they could accurately burn the most fat calories and have that be enhanced.
Super interesting. So I'm going to ask some dumb questions here. One is, so is this the same thing as respiratory quotient or similar to that?
Yeah, no, that's not dumb at all. That's a great question. Respiratory quotient, it's also called RER or respiratory exchange ratio. So yeah, that's great.
Got it. And the FAST study, which involved Zach Bitter, where they fat adapted athletes and over the long term, one problem with a lot of ketogenic performance studies is for folks listening who aren't familiar, is that the time to adapt to keto isn't long enough. And so they have these 8-week studies. And for the first, 4 to 6 weeks, they're just getting adapted. But the FASTER study, I believe it was called, with Jeff Volek, that Zach Bitter took part in on endurance runners, did they use the same technique, the same technology?
That's a great question. I'm not sure, but I would assume so. It's one of the best ways to understand the fuel that you are burning. And yeah, that's a really great point. A lot of people, when they start these kinds of diets, they don't give themselves enough time to really adapt to it. One of the graphs that we show, back when I was doing these tests, would show the amount of carbohydrate or sugar that the body could store. And that number would depend on your gender, but generally be about 1,500 to 2,000 calories, meaning you have about that many calories of fuel in the body. And then it would show a graph that would show how many calories of fat energy that you have on your body. And that's based on your weight and body fat percentage. And that number could be tens or hundreds of thousands of calories available in the body. And most endurance athletes know, like I knew when I was, racing and cycling quite a bit, that the sugar calories are going to run out. There's such a limited amount that if you go for hard enough and for long enough, that is going to run out and you're going to bonk, you're going to hit the wall. So one strategy that we came up with is to consume a massive amount of carbohydrates and carry those with you while you're training and exercising. So you have, the Gatorades and the gels and the bars and all these things to keep your sugar storage topped off. Well, what we've learned over the years is that why would we want to run our body on that fuel source when we're carrying around with us tens or hundreds of thousands of calories from another source that's just already there and it's ready to go? Why can't we teach our body to use that as the fuel source? And then you see people like Zach Bitter who can go out and run for 8-9 hours and consume a very minimal amount of calories and never have his energy drop off and never bonk. So that was really key and crucial to understanding how our bodies can use calories while we're, living and exercising and things like that.
Yeah, super interesting. And I guess one question is just on so it totally makes sense on like the ratio of fat to carbs you're burning. You want you want to be burning more fat, ideally, if you're trying to lose weight and trying to burn off body fat. But in terms of like the quantity, the amount of calories you're burning, would you necessarily want that to be higher and less efficient if you're trying to lose weight? Like, how do you think about the trade-offs between a metabolism of someone who, when you're measuring it, like what would the practical implications be when you measured someone's metabolism for someone whose respiratory quotient gets really, really high on certain tests, or the amount of air they're expending gets really high on a given test? Couldn't that mean they're out of shape, or couldn't it mean that they're just inefficient? How do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So we would do two separate kinds of tests, and one would be more for exercise, where we would start at a really easy intensity and take people up to a very difficult intensity, ramping up over the course of maybe 15 or 20 minutes. We would measure their heart rate, and we would see that the total number of calories would always increase, but we would reach a point where the fat burning calories would peak and then descend as the body is using more and more carbohydrates to fuel that particular exercise. Now, the other test that we would do would be at rest. And so this is where it became really interesting. We would bring somebody in. They would be, pretty relaxed. We'd put them in a dark room and let them breathe into this mask. We'd let them sit there alone in the dark for 20 minutes. And we would measure their resting metabolic rate. What is the number of calories that your body needs to sit in a chair and be alive? Have the lights on, your brain is working, your heart is working, you've got a certain amount of muscle mass, and muscle is metabolically active, so it needs a certain amount of calories. And we would actually fairly accurately measure that. And over the years, the resting metabolic rate would be something that we could put into a formula and say, okay, you're burning 1,500 calories at rest. We assume with your day-to-day activity, that's another 500 calories. Maybe you get some exercise in, so that adds up to 2,500 calories a day. So let's just give you 2,000 calories a day, and you should be able to lose a pound a week. And that's kind of how we approached it in the early days. And it just never really seemed to work for people, because when you start feeding somebody less calories, their bodies will become used to that, and they will start burning less calories and become, to your point, they would be more efficient because they're burning less calories to do what their body needs to do. But that's the body's response to not having enough energy to do what it needs to do. So it starts shutting itself down. It starts slowing itself down. You see people who have done a calorie restrictive diet, and before long you start to recognize them because they're always cold. They feel miserable. They have cravings that are through the roof. They seem to be always hungry. They might be on some type of a diet, but they can't sustain it. And they don't understand why, after a few weeks or a few months, they have no more willpower, and they go off their diet, and now their metabolic rate has declined. So now they start gaining more weight than they even started with, and they have to start all over again. And that was really apparent early on that if you calorie restrict yourself, your metabolism is going to slow down and you will fail. And it happened for so many people, and we didn't really have a great tool to be able to fix that besides making their bodies less efficient by burning more calories to be able to lose weight. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. That's super interesting. And can you talk a little bit more about like how you were, some of the things you learned from applying this across like a large swath of clients? Like, did you learn both about like what was effective in terms of how to get them to lose more weight more quickly, how to increase their athletic performance, but also I'm super curious if you started to narrow in on like when people become fat adapted and how long that takes, because there's so much debate about that. Like how long does it take to get into ketosis versus fat adaptation, and for like performance to return to baseline, things like that?
Yeah, sure. Great questions. So I'll always remember in 2012, we had a call with a doctor. I'm sorry, he's not a doctor, I don't think, but a coach, triathlon coach out of Colorado. His name is Bob Sebahar. And he was doing the same kinds of testing that we were doing. But what he was doing was modifying people's diets and the triathletes that he was working on. And he did this call, I'll never forget it, where he's saying he's got athletes that are racing at the highest levels of triathlon, and they're consuming like 50 or 60 calories per hour while they're on the bike. And that's really it. And they're changing somebody's fat adaptation ability through nutrition. And that was absurd. Like, here I am racing my bike. I'm eating and snacking and eating and snacking. And, all of these products I'm consuming on the bike are making me not feel so good. I needed to take naps every single day. I needed snacks between clients. And this guy's saying that you don't need any of that if you teach somebody to burn fat, and you do that through changing nutrition. So mind-blowing. And that's where this kind of started for me. So I started adapting my own diet. I started to include more fats. Then I came across the work of Nina Teichol's and The Big Fat Surprise, which was just an amazing book to read and still one of my favorites.
Great book.
Great book. She's amazing. Such a cool person. And so, I kind of transitioned from, a higher fat diet to a high fat diet, and then kind of switched over to keto and maybe a low carb diet. And that kind of progressed to where we got to, 2 or 3 years ago. It's another thing I'll never forget. It was so strange. People started doing ketogenic diets. So they're eating a lot of fat, they're eating a lot of protein. Then they start kind of doing fasting, and that's a whole different thing. And they're coming in and doing these metabolic assessments with me. And let's say somebody who's on this type of diet should have a resting metabolic rate of about 2,000 calories. And I measure them, and their metabolic rate comes back to like 2,600 calories or 2,700 calories, like several hundred calories higher than their resting metabolic rate, which, again, for weight loss and fat loss, that can be really good. Your body's using a lot of fuel. And I start telling these people like, wow, your metabolic rate's really high. You feel good. Your body temperature's high. You've got good energy. You're not hungry that much. Those are all really good signs. But if you don't eat 2,700 calories a day as the minimum, this is going to start to go down. And these people are looking at me like, wait a sec, I can't eat that many calories unless you want me to go out and eat Twinkies and Wonder Bread. Like, there's no way I can get to that many calories. And so that was really perplexing, and took me a long time to understand that when you teach yourself to use stored fat as fuel, then that's what makes up the difference in your metabolic rate. And that's the reason why these people are burning so many calories, even though they're not consuming that many calories. The body doesn't need the food that you ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's using the food that you've already stored up. It's already on your body. You have thousands and thousands and thousands of those calories. And by teaching yourself to access them, body says, hey, great, like, we've got this fuel. We don't need to eat. We're not that hungry. And there's so much fuel here. Let's ramp this stuff up. Let's boost the metabolism. Let's burn it off. Let's use it up. Let's use it for fuel. And that was really, it was very interesting to learn about and see in my clients. From there, it was just really easy. Like, I don't care what people eat if they have a vegan diet or a carnivore diet or anything in between. Like, I don't get paid whether you choose a certain diet or not. I get paid if you get results. You'll come back to me if you get really good results. And that was just the thing that, ended up giving the most people the most results. And we got to the point we were tracking, weight loss groups. We would do like 2-month weight loss contests, and we would track our group specifically. My wife and I would kind of run our own thing. We'd do certain seminars, and kind of under the radar, we would talk about keto and talk about carnivore diets and things like that. And our group would always do the best, and they would always lose nearly 100% of their calories from fat, not just from weight, if that makes sense. So that was really cool.
Wow.
You asked about performance, and that's also very interesting. And I do agree with you that it does take some time. It takes time to adapt to this. It takes time to teach your body to use the fuel that you already have with you, rather than needing fuel from more food, more snacks, things like that. So if you decide to switch over to this lifestyle, there is a period of time where your performance is probably going to decrease. But I really, from what I've seen personally and what I've seen with my clients, I believe that declining period of performance is temporary and absolutely can be bypassed. I mean, I time a certain commute that I do on my bike now with the timing that I would do when I was racing, and I'm doing it much faster now than I ever was then, and I can do that on a 20-hour fast with no water even. You know what I mean? It takes a little bit of time, but I do truly believe that you shouldn't see your performance decline in the long run by eating a low carbohydrate diet.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people ask me about how to make liver more tasteful and how to cook it or incorporate other organ meats on carnivore. Optimal Carnivore can help you do just that with their grass-fed organ complex. It was created by carnivores for carnivores. They start by sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, gently freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Just 6 of these capsules a day is the same as eating an ounce of raw organ meat. I personally take these every single day, as does my wife. Even though we both eat liver and other organ meats, our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal. And this unique blend has 9 different organs, including beef liver, brain, thymus, kidney, spleen, etc. And I think it's great to get a daily dose of these organs when you can. So it covers all your bases, whether you're at home or traveling. What's also cool is they plant a tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So visit www.optimalcarnivore.com/carnivorecast and use the code carnivore10 to receive 10% off your purchase. Thanks, and back to the show. Do you see, Casey, like an average time it takes for people to adapt, or is it just so individual and depends on how they're doing the diet and all those factors?
Yeah, great point. I think it also depends on where people are starting. So if somebody's going from a standard American diet, which is probably the worst thing you could do, to go, really hard into keto, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. I don't know, 1 to 3 months maybe is like an average. And I would encourage people to just kind of stick with it. If they want to try it, just write it out. Know that you're going to suffer a little bit, but over time, you will be able to teach yourself to use those calories, again, in the form of stored fat. It's the energy that's already on the body. Most people want less of it. It's already there. Let's teach the body to use it and then just be patient with the results.
Yeah, makes total sense. And how about carnivore? How did you land on carnivore? How did you find this world, this community, and tell that story?
So carnivore was interesting. This whole thing came full circle for me yesterday. I got to host Dr. Sean Baker on my show, and I had to admit to him that the episode that he did on Joe Rogan was one that I haven't finished. To this day, I haven't finished it because he got halfway into explaining it. And I was like, this guy, what a clown. Like, you can't eat just meat and be healthy. Are you absolutely insane? And I turned it off and I never finished listening to it. So that was 3 years ago. So I was introduced to the Carnivore Diet by Sean Baker on that episode of Rogan that he did. And I thought it was really outlandish. And then I started to hear the story of more people who were successfully pulling off a carnivore diet. And they were listing all of these benefits that were so insane to me. Like, you're eating only meat and now your skin is better, or your IBS went away, or you can, I heard from one of my clients that she could, like, her legs would tan better than they would when she was not a carnivore. And I was like, that's insane. So I listened to enough people, I listened to you, and I decided to try my own carnivore diet in April of 2019. I wanted to give it 4 weeks to see how I felt, and I just have never looked back. I think the thing that was the most surprising to me, going from more of a keto to more of a carnivore diet, was it wasn't necessarily mental clarity, because I feel like I already had that, but it was an enhancement of mental optimization, or my mood was just better, or my reaction to stress was so much more calm. I remember telling people it, like, just kind of regulated my life by maybe 2 or 3 different levels. Like, if I was at a 6 before, then I would be at like an 8 or a 9. I would just be better. I would just be happier. I was less hungry. It was easy. I mean, that was a big thing, is, I could eat once or twice a day if I wanted, and it just wasn't that big of a deal. And yeah, just feeling better for me personally was, I mean, so worth it. And what I would want to share with anybody, to get them to try the diet is just see how you feel. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely agree and have experienced a lot of those benefits myself. It's really funny that you thought Sean Baker was a complete quack and then you interviewed him yesterday. I'm really looking forward to that episode, by the way.
Oh, thanks. That great.
And how do you like to eat today? I know you're not strictly 100% only animal foods all the time. I don't, by the way, I've talked about it on the podcast before. Listeners are probably sick of hearing me say it, but I don't think if you eat any non-animal products, you're not on a carnivore diet. That's not, I don't think, a helpful distinction or an accurate distinction in my book. But I'm curious, what does kind of a day of eating look like for you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I found the carnivore diet out of curiosity, I guess. Like I didn't have a skin condition. I didn't have mental issues. I was already pretty happy, low carb, keto. I just wanted to try it for the sake of trying it. So there's no real like a clinical reason for me to be 100% carnivore. I did a very strict form of the carnivore diet for probably a year where I was primarily eating ribeye and eggs. And that was basically my diet. Like I didn't really include much else other than that. There was a time that I was eating quite a bit of liver. I would do raw frozen liver. I would try to supplement where possible. And then when the shutdown happened earlier this year, we just kind of relaxed our diet a little bit. And so we still both will eat a very carnivorous diet. We both eat one meal a day generally. And so I'll wake up, I'll have coffee. I still like to do some form of, salted, buttery coffee with a little bit of MCT oil. I think that just helps me with my mental clarity and my energy. And then we really like to save our meal for when the day is mostly done. Everything's over. We can relax. We can rest and digest. And we'll have, last night it was brats. The night before was burgers. We've got into this really fun thing that we do. And it's been like every other day where we make these delicious double burgers with, bacon or, we will do a little bit of grilled onions and we'll have that. And we call it Burger Day around here. And it's like, if you wake up on Burger Day, there's a little bit of extra excitement around our house. Like, ooh, is today Burger Day? And then you have to remember like, oh, we did that last night. It's almost like a little bit sad. Like, shoot, it's not Burger Day. That was yesterday. So we keep it very simple. We don't make it dogmatic. And that's one thing that I appreciate you and your approach is you don't make it dogmatic either. And that makes things really approachable. Last week, I've been reading this book by Mike Viking, called The Little Book of Hygge. And it's all about like coziness and comfort. And he talks about food, and he had a stew recipe that was really meat heavy, had some potatoes. We did it and it was delicious. So we just like to keep things really simple, and we stick with the same things. We're not very restrictive. We don't have, grass-fed perfect meat all the time. We just eat until we're really full and find foods and recipes that we really enjoy, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a super sound approach, and sounds like I need to come visit for Burger Day because you're making me hungry.
Good. They're so good, dude. They're really, really good. In fact, we haven't gone out to eat at all since March, and part of the reason is ours are just really good. we don't like to go eat other people's because ours are, we think, better.
Yeah, my wife and I always joke about how we just eat so well at home. If only we could go to a restaurant and they could cook our food the way we want it and serve us.
Exactly. Love that. I love it. It's great.
And how about moving over to the exercise portion? What type of strength training and or movement practices do you like to use with your clients and yourself?
Sure. So my opinion about this has really changed, especially last year. I came across the work of Dr. Doug McGuff and Body by Science, which I know you're familiar with. So in the past, if you would have come in to see me and you would have said, I'm a soccer player and I want to train for soccer, I would say, great, let's do movements that look like soccer in the gym. So let's swing your legs like a soccer player would. Or maybe I'd have you do some work with like a heavier ball than a soccer ball. Or I would have you jump and twist in a certain way, or maybe drop off of a box, or, those types of things. The concept behind Body by Science is that none of those soccer movements in a gym are actually soccer. The only thing that's soccer is soccer. Like, you need to go play soccer to be very good at soccer. But if you want to be strong for soccer, you need to train a little bit differently in the gym. And that to me really resonated and really changed the way I train people. And so the type of strength training that I like the most is called high intensity training. It's often confused with high intensity interval training, which is at a higher heart rate and is done by jumping around to different exercises and doing them very quickly. This is more like you're lifting weights at a fairly slow tempo, and you are taking your muscles to an extremely deep level of fatigue. So could be failure, if you want to call it that, could be, close to failure, but you're basically shaking by the time you're done with these lifts. And you do a series of different lifts that works the total body to a point of very, very deep fatigue. And he calls it inroading muscle tissue. So you're basically destroying all the different types of muscle tissue that you have. And that forces the body to say, whoa, what we just did was a lot. That required a lot of strength. It maybe pushed us to, the strength that we didn't have. So, okay, body, now it's time to build some strength. Let's build some muscle. Let's get strong. Let's build bone density and connective tissue. And let's make sure that we're strong enough to face this load the next time this person does this to us again. And when I started implementing that a little bit more, I saw better results with my people. And I don't think that you have to do exactly what he says in his book to do. There's really specific protocols and things like that. I just think it's super important to lift weights, resistance train, and take yourself to a very deep level of fatigue to get the absolute best results. Everything else outside of that, I think of as a skill. So if you like to run, you like to cycle. I love to cycle. I love to paddleboard. I play ice hockey. I love to play ice hockey. Those are all fun and great, and you should go do those and do those as much as you like as a skill set. But keep those as a skill set. And when you're in the gym, really focus on taking yourself to a very deep level of fatigue through strength training. Besides that, the biggest thing I recommend is just staying active. It's what you do with your awesome dog. It's what I do with my awesome dogs. Just be active. Go outside. Get a walk in. Go enjoy the scenery. Move in a way that you like. For somebody who's very out of shape, maybe that's just walk to the mailbox or walk to the end of the street and back. If you're more fit, maybe you can walk several miles a day. Just be active and do things that you really enjoy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a fantastic approach, Casey. And for folks not familiar, I highly recommend the work of Doug McGuff and high intensity training. There's also a great podcast by Lawrence Neal on high intensity business, which actually inspired me to start this podcast.
I didn't know
Lawrence is a good friend. Yeah, Lawrence is a good friend. I had been talking to him for years about podcasting, and then he kept encouraging me, and I finally did it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I knew you guys were close, but I didn't know that was the reason.
Yeah, I used to listen and re-listen to every single episode of his show. And I asked him, what's the minimum needed to get started, and just put a few episodes out there. And he helped me out with really like minimalist, efficient setup. He's a huge fan of Tim Ferriss. So he, gave me the 80-20.
Well, I have to thank him indirectly because you have helped me do the same thing. With minimal amount of equipment. So that's super cool. And yeah, I really highly recommend their work. It's very, very good.
Yeah. And if inroading sounds painful, it's just as painful as it sounds, if not more. I trained that way for a while. I train a bit differently now because I have different goals, but
sure.
It was tough. Yeah. Tough to mentally do that to yourself every workout.
It's really tough. And the interesting thing too is like in 2020, we lost access to the gym. We had all these great machines that we could use. And now it was like we were moved outside and we didn't have weights, and we had to find ways to be more creative and, help people get those same results, but with, less equipment or no equipment. And it's really amazing how you can take those strategies and change them a little bit and tweak them to fit our environment. And you can still get a lot done without access to a ton of machines. If you have a park, if you've got some rocks you can grab, if you have monkey bars, like there's so many different really cool ways to get those same results without necessarily needing tons of machines and tons of weights. We've been able to do it quite successfully, and it's pretty awesome. It just, you have to be a little bit more creative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Dr. James Steele is one of the authorities in the space of high intensity, low volume exercise. And I know he personally has been training with almost entirely body weight for several years and has very impressive physique because he's been able to build mass with that. He has some great videos of his workouts on Instagram.
I just wrote that down. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah. I'll send it to you after the show.
Oh, great.
And so talking about the podcast, Casey, why did you start it, and what have you learned so far? What has it been like?
I'll start with what I've learned, which is that I say 47,000 times an hour. I say a lot.
We all do.
It's hard to hear. There it is again. So the podcast was, for me, a way to give back. Podcasting has been really important for me for the last 5 or 6 years. When I first started listening, it was a way for me to learn in a passive way while I was doing something else. So you're driving. I used to always listen to music. Well, that's a time that you can learn. You can be learning while you're driving. You can be learning while you're working out. And I found podcasting that way, and it really has changed my life. A cool thing about a podcast is, like, if you write a book, the book is done, and that's how you felt about that certain thing. But maybe a week later, you learn something different. You learn something new that you want to put out into the world. And a podcast gives you a glimpse into the guest, at that moment. What do you feel about this today, right now? And for me, the podcast was a way to give back all the things that I have learned. We are so fortunate this year that we were able to start our company, Boundless Body. And we realized that we could keep our lives a little bit smaller and have everything that we wanted or needed. Where we were grinding and pushing and working so many hours all the time in a really competitive, 100% commission job. Now we had a little bit more time and space in our lives to work with the people that we wanted to work with in safe spaces. And we had time. We had this resource that we have just not ever had before. And so for me, it's a way to give back. I tell you and all my other guests that I want you to come on. I want you to tell your story. I want you to give our guests some interesting information. We don't have sponsors. I get to interview whoever I like and ask them whatever I like. I don't need to ask permission from anybody. Last week, I interviewed Dr. Bill Schindler on Monday, have you had him on your show?
No, I haven't, but I love the episode you did with him, and I've listened to him a lot on Food Lies. He's great.
His content.
I should have him on.
Yeah, you should. He's great. When I asked him if he wanted to be on the show, he replied almost immediately and said, "Casey, I would love to be on your show." That's just the kind of person that he is. He's just so willing to share his information. He's awesome. He's such a great dude. So I interviewed him on Monday, and on Tuesday, I drove down about 45 minutes south of my house to a town called Springville, where my grandparents have lived for 500 years. And I got to interview them. I didn't tell them I was coming down. I just set up a microphone a few feet away and interviewed them and talked about their life. And again, I put it out there and released it. And if people listen, great. If they don't listen, I don't really care. I got to do that, and I got to experience that. And that was really special. And so it's really fun to have a very diverse group of people and just ask their story and learn from them. What I guess what I've learned, besides saying a bazillion times per hour, is as much as I cringe to re-listen to my own voice, I am so fascinated by re-listening to episodes and feeling like I'm learning the same things again from the guests that I've already learned from.
Yes,
Bethany and
agreed.
Yeah, isn't that weird? I wouldn't have thought that. Bethany and I interviewed you, and we're familiar with your content, and we love your show, and we learned from you in that interview. And a few weeks later, I'm listening to a new episode, and it finishes, and it plays an older episode, and plays your episode. And I had done the interview. I was there with you doing the interview with Bethany, but listening to again, I'm learning more stuff from you again. And I wouldn't have assumed that. And so that part is something that's so cool for me, is to relearn the things that I've already learned. So that's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And maybe for folks, I completely find that myself too. I re-listen to all my guests and always learn something new. Sometimes I'll revisit an episode months later and be like, wow, that is really answering a question I was debating in my mind. I can't believe I didn't remember this.
That's right.
But yeah, it's just the value of repetition, and we're so privileged to have these types of conversations. It's really
so
great.
Cool. Yeah, it's so cool. Just your podcast, you had a simple idea. You did it as simply as possible with a minimal amount of equipment, and you are changing lives. An hour a week, you're changing lives. It's really amazing. It's very cool.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's all a testament to the guests. They're the ones providing the value. And Casey, what, maybe based on your knowledge of putting you on the spot here a little bit of nutrition and training and lifestyle intervention in general, maybe what's one or two things that you can provide for the guests who, are maybe on a carnivore diet, maybe have some minimalist exercise routine. Imagine people listening are at all different stages of their journeys. What are some things that you've found to be really, really valuable for yourself or for others that maybe they haven't thought of that they could start doing new habits?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I've learned, like earlier this year, I got certified on the MeatRx site as a nutrition coach. And so I've had new people reaching out to me specifically about the carnivore diet. And that's been wonderful. It's been amazing to meet people all over the country and chat with them. And one of the things that I realize is that people are so used to thinking that they can't get in shape. They are broken, uniquely broken. Something is wrong with them. They tried a diet and it didn't work. And they said, well, these people told me to try this diet and it didn't work. So I must suck. I must be really bad at this. I'll try it again next January. But then they fail again and again and again. And they think that they can't do a thing. And we'll have these conversations with these people. And it seems like they want to have something that's really complicated because that's what they're used to. And I think one of the best parts about a carnivore diet is it can be very simple. And it doesn't need to be extremely strict unless there's a reason for it to be. And you don't need to eat 5, 6, 7, 8 meals a day. You don't need to shop for a ton of different foods. I mean, the shopping list we used to give to people that have 100 different foods, and you have to go shop for it and buy the food, and then you cook the food and all the snacks and all these individual meals, and you eat them on Monday and Tuesday, but then you don't eat them on Thursday and Friday because you're starving. And the beauty of the carnivore diet, I think, is that it's so simple and easy to do. That I guess I was just thinking about this. It's kind of funny. So we're going back and rewatching some of the old Seinfeld episodes. I don't know. Are you a fan, Seinfeld?
Yeah, absolutely. Great show.
There's an episode that we just watched where Kramer wants to build those levels in his apartment and Jerry bets him that he's not going to be able to do it. And Kramer a few days later is like, oh yeah, bet's off because I'm not doing it. And Jerry's like, well, I won the bet. And Kramer's saying, well, no, the bet's not valid because I didn't do it. And that's kind of the way I think of some of these standard diets that we give to people is like, you could probably make it work, but nobody can do it. You won't do it. And carnivore is so easy. And you can just benefit from having a little bit more ground beef or giving yourself more permission to have some eggs in the morning. As far as the exercise goes, just have some mindful exercise. It doesn't need to be a lot. In fact, a little can go a very long way, and find ways to make it work. Be creative. Lift something really heavy. Go on a walk. Eat healthy animal foods, and that's about as complicated as you need to make it. Unless there's a reason to make it more complicated, just keep it really simple.
Yeah, small changes. That's the key.
Yep.
Completely agree. And I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to be a little self-indulgent here now, Casey. My wife and I have this fantasy picking up and moving and living in different parts of the country for 2-3 months at a time, especially with COVID and, both of us being able to work remotely and work from home. And one place we love is the Southwest, states like Utah and New Mexico and Colorado. And you post pictures of your hikes that make me jealous all the time. So I'd love to hear from you. What's it like living in Utah and being out there?
I'm very conflicted. I don't know if I should tell you the truth or tell you a lie and keep you and everybody else who's going to listen out of here. Go to Denver. Everybody go to Denver. Weather's great. It's by the mountains. No, Utah's amazing. And one thing that's funny is the pictures that I post, those aren't even hikes. That's my neighborhood. I rarely even leave my neighborhood. And that's the beauty that I'm surrounded by. I mean, I'm a 10-minute walk away from a lake. I can drop my paddleboard in and paddle around anytime I like. By the lake, there's a creek that runs, and I meditate there every single morning. And it's a really incredible place. In an hour, I could drive to 7 or 8 different ski resorts. In 2 hours, I could get to a lot of like desert terrain. In 4 hours, I could be in Moab or St. George. There's such a diversity here that's really beautiful. The seasons are amazing. It's such a great place to be holed up. We are just completely enamored by it. Our city, South Jordan's amazing. Our development is called Daybreak. It's absolutely amazing. It's a really great spot. That said, everybody, I hear Denver is also amazing, so move there.
Great answer. Well, I'm definitely going to have to at least make a visit sometime soon.
It's great.
And Casey, what are you looking forward to, either personally or professionally? Where can people find out more about you? And I'll, of course, have links to all of this in the show notes.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. So I guess looking forward to, I don't know, endless possibilities. I mean, we were just kind of locked into that corporate job, and now we don't have it, and we don't have anybody to answer to, and we're kind of just faking all of this as we go and learning about it and really enjoying life. So I guess I don't know where life is going to go, but I'm happy with where it is now and happy with a slower pace. We are really happy doing things like the blogging and the podcasting and feeling like we're helping out other people and highlighting other people's amazing stories. Having you on was amazing. So I guess I'm most excited for an open future and just see what there is to come. We're really excited for that. Bethany just told me yesterday that she's booked out for sessions until 2021. So she's very busy.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, she does some tissue work that's really amazing. And, I train people and I do nutrition coaching, but Bethany literally takes people out of pain. And so her work is amazing, and she's so much needed and appreciated in the world that she's busy. She's way, way busy. So yeah, just looking for an open future and just see what happens. We're really excited with, all the weird things that have happened this year that have made this possible. Our company is called Boundless Body, and you can find us at myboundlessbody.com. Our podcast is called Boundless Body Radio. That's on pretty much every, podcast site that you can find. And yeah, we're just having a really good time and making it up as we go and really enjoying a different pace to life.
That's great. That's fantastic. And I'll of course link to all of that, Casey. It's been such a pleasure having you on. It's long overdue, but really great chatting with you as always. And I know listeners will love this episode and hopefully head over and check out your podcast as well and learn a lot from that.
Well, thank you very much. I really have learned a lot from you and from your work. And it's not just what you do, it's how you do it that makes a big difference. And it's easy for me to share your information with other people. And I would just really, really like to say to your listeners, like, if you have questions, reach out, find an expert. I did the same with you. I needed to hire you to help me to work through some of these things. And I never would have been able to get past that had I not talked to somebody who is an expert. And you have made your content available and easy to understand. And it's really appreciated by me and by a lot of the people that I work with.
Of course. Thank you for saying that, Casey. Well, really appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Have a great day. Again. Thank you.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered? Or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore or research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.